Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Shape Live. I'm Andrew Knight. I'm Head of New Product Development at Cambridge Assessment English, and I'll be hosting today's session. In Shape events, we talk a lot about educational change, and I'm really excited about our topic for discussion today, where we want to go beyond ideas for change to understand the practical reality of how to implement those ideas. Change obviously can happen in schools, and we have two people here today with a very positive narrative to tell us about how it's possible to have a happy school where well-being, social justice, and social responsibility are all at the heart of the curriculum. But crucially, happiness and well-being are not seen as an add-on. They play a key role in achieving great outcomes. So there doesn't have to be a false dichotomy between a happy school and one that has amazing academic results. And to help us think about why that binary distinction is not helpful, it's fantastic to be joined today by Jeremy Hannay and Kata Csuba. We'll hear first from Jeremy, who is the head teacher of Three Bridges Primary School, an award-winning innovative primary school in London. His doctorate explored school improvement, school climate, teacher self-efficacy, and teacher learning. He writes regularly about counterculture school leadership and supports schools in creating a happy, high-achieving ethos, both across the UK and Europe. Jeremy, do you want to just turn your camera on and say hello?
Hi.
Great, fantastic. So we'll hear from Jeremy in a minute or two. And after that, we'll hear from Kata, who is Head of Flourishing and Inclusion at the School of Humanity, a revolutionary online school with a progressive model, an interdisciplinary curriculum, and a mission to reinvent education. Kata, would you like to just turn your camera on and say hi?
Hi, hello everyone.
Great, thanks, Kata. We're going to be posing questions to our panelists in about 20 minutes, and we'd love to bring in your observations and questions. So please do add them in the chat as we go along. And please do use our hashtag #ShapeLive when sharing in your networks. And if you can't stay for the whole event, a recording will be available afterwards at shapeeducation.org. We also have a poll in the chat for you. We'd like to know, what do you see as the greatest obstacle to innovation in the education sector? So if you complete the poll, and then you can give your reasons why you've answered the way you have in the chat. So let's get started. Over to you, Jeremy, to get us going.
Fantastic. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you might be. I'm just going to share my screen with you here so that you can see what I see. There we go. Now, hopefully that's working for you. I feel really honored to be asked to speak today. I am a blabbermouth. I'm a real talker, and normally I spend 10 minutes of my keynotes, waffling on, and I only have 10 minutes today, so I have to get straight to it. So yes, Jeremy is my name. I'm the head teacher. I don't have an incredible title like Kata, although I'm going to look into changing that very shortly. I do work at Three Bridges Primary School in London, and I want to talk to you today about nurturing happiness and high performance, because they're not mutually exclusive. They're actually, one feeds the other, but without the high stakes in the English landscape. And that's the context in which I work. You can hear from my funny accent that I'm not English. I am indeed Canadian. And the idea of performativity doesn't exist in this same way at all where I'm from. And so coming to the UK was a shock for me and a shock to my system. Although I've been here for 12 years now, there are still some things that I'm getting used to. But I work within the UK context, and some of you may not. And so I wanted to just spend a minute putting a little bit of that together, and the idea of performativity, really about how we regulate, employ judgments, and compare schools, looking at, in the UK, very rigid conventions that people must adhere to. So things that are typical in most English primary schools would be things like regular graded or high stakes lesson observation, the scrutiny of lessons, planning, learning environments, the monitoring of those same sorts of things. They sometimes it's called quality assurance. learning walks. I mean, there's lots of different ways that this is framed, but the long and the short of it is that teachers in the United Kingdom, in primary schools and secondary schools in the United Kingdom, often feel a very high level of pressure to perform. And that leads to a variety of things that I'm going to speak of in a moment. But I think one of the things we need to do first is ask ourselves why that happens. Why are there these really heavy triangulations between what people see in lessons and what's going on in pupil books and the planning as some sort of predictor or judgment on quality? And so I think from a head teacher's perspective, I think, lots of people talk about performance. If they don't have their eye on what's happening, performance will decline or derail, people will get lazy, this sort of narrative. Or it's about consistency. If we're not checking up on people, they're going to deviate from what we think is best. Or maybe it's about standards, that they might be doing their best, but if they're not following the instructional program that we've given them, it's probably not going to be good enough. Or maybe it's about development. Maybe it's really aspirational. I'm in there because I want to see where teachers are at, and I want to be able to plan a development journey for them. And I use that language quite intentionally. It's a head teacher going in, seeing something, or a senior member of staff going in, making a judgment or an evaluation, and then making a pathway or determination for that professional based on what their view is. And I think that, that can be quite damaging. And the damage that's done, I think, is this. These are statistics from the DFE, from the NEU, who might be seen to combat the DFE in a number of forces, but actually their statistics align. 40% of new teachers in their learning quit in the first 5 years of becoming teachers. Criminal, shocking statistic. 40% of teachers said that in 5 years' time, they don't see themselves in education anymore. I mean, a horrible, horrible kind of environment to be working in. What teachers are saying and what would improve things: to be trusted more as professionals, scrutinized less, that the amount of monitoring and scrutiny in the school is excessive. The government's waged a war on workload, with head teachers kind of being the target. So looking at marking and planning and admin, levels of trust and threat within schools. But I think one of the things that we know is that teachers are at the heart of really successful schools and systems. But the culture of leadership and management that's around those teachers makes a big difference. And I think, it's that school leadership effect on the features of the organizations. And I guess what I'm getting at here is that while as a head teacher, I am subject to high levels of scrutiny and regulation or evaluation from organizations like Ofsted, that put my job and my career really at risk if things aren't going the way they should be according to the framework. It doesn't mean that actually that's the way that our schools need to operate, that there are other ways, there are, better ways. And I think when we think about what performative management practices are driven by, or what they say about your organization, they're about external accountability, they're about convenience, it's fast, it's about explanation, it's about absorption of basic knowledge and data. But I think what I'm getting at is that the values that underpin incredible schools in this country, are things like internal responsibility, developing a sense of that internal responsibility, reflection, individual and collective agency, a real depth of thinking, and the generation and application of knowledge and understanding. And it's thinking about alignment. How is it that what we do as school leaders, and what kind of soil, what kind of environment is it that we create for our teachers and our children? And what do they say? Do they need to say the same things that Ofsted says to my school? And I think what we found at Three Bridges 100% is that they do not. So if we want strong performance and great standards and great systems, I think what we have to understand first is that if we want pupil well-being, if we want pupil collaboration, if we want pupil connectedness, if we want pupil voice or agency, if we want to release control to our pupils so they're more involved or the center of their learning, if we want happiness, if we want mistake-making in our classrooms, they first have to be inside our staff rooms. We have to take care of the people who take care of our little people. And this is that whole mantra that we have at Three Bridges around being soil people. How is it that we're growing incredible educators and placing them inside the kind of conditions that allow them to recreate meaningful and memorable and deep learning experiences for our children? If they've never been involved in them first, they have no hope in creating them in their classrooms. So I think what we're talking about at Three Bridges is things like close to practice research. creating a culture where things like lesson study or spirals of inquiry, teacher research groups, where those are the sorts of things that lead the narrative. When we look at teacher-led learning, so reducing or getting rid of entirely the idea of data-based performance management and the triangulation of one or two people's thoughts on the development of a professional, and handing over the learning over time in teacher-led learning projects, allowing the teachers themselves, the staff, to design lines of inquiry that they're interested in, that are going to allow them to become the very best professionals that they could be, using coaching conversations and a culture of trust and agency through which they can develop. Very often teachers develop into the space that we give them in the same way that children do. And we have to ask ourselves what kind of space we're giving people to develop and grow. The other thing I think is developing a culture of self-referral. How is it that we identify problems? And what is it that it says about our school if one person or a small group of people are tasked with evaluating or judging the value or quality of others? Does it create the kind of environment in which teachers can truly flourish? If I'm the one who's deciding how everything is going to happen and how everyone is going to be, I can tell you today, Three Bridges would be, a shadow of what it is. What we needed to do was hand that information over, to the teaching staff. So, what has happened over time at Three Bridges? Well, we're outstanding in every category in a community that's very, very disadvantaged. We have a range of things happening. Our attainment and achievement across the school is well above national, even though we serve a community that is 40 to 50% pupil premium, 98% Black, Asian, minority ethnic, 35% of the children turnover over time. We've done our very best to build a school where the well-being is the work. I've been involved in lots of conversations and visited lots of schools where they've got a well-being policy, they've got a well-being committee, they often maybe now they have a well-being charter, and they have a great offer on, maybe free massages for staff or fitness passes, or they do cakes on a Friday, all of which is really, really great, except if that is enabled to distract you from the fact that your job is terrible and you're miserable because the work itself is not fulfilling, not inspirational, not developmental, well, then none of those things have any hope of lasting. So when we're talking about building the kind of schools that reshape the future, we're talking about building the kind of schools in this country where teachers stay teachers and develop and grow over time into incredible educators. These are the sorts of underpinnings that I think we found a few steps in the right direction with. And we're very, very happy to share them with you. And I hope that in 10 minutes was very helpful for you today, but that's a little bit about Three Bridges. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jeremy. Some fascinating observations there. Do please keep putting questions and comments in the chat. We're saving questions until after we've heard from both Jeremy and Kata. And I think let's look at the results of the poll now. We asked, what do you see as the greatest obstacle to innovation in education? And oh, here we go. So it looks like government entities, Department of Ministry of Education, are seen as the greatest obstacles, followed by regulatory bodies, down to leadership, parents, and other. Okay, we'll come back to that later. So let's move straight on now to hear Kata's perspective and how the School of Humanity is reimagining education.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andrew. Let me share my screen with you. All right. I think we are good to go. So let me start by saying what an honor it is to be here and share this stage with Jeremy. And actually, I love the fact that Jeremy talked more about the teacher's perspective, because you'll see that I'm going to be centering a little bit on learner well-being. So I think we're all here today because we find it important to reshape and reimagine education. And we all acknowledge that the role of education should be, or is, to prepare next generations for the future so that they can contribute to human progress. Now, let me share 3 numbers with you. Right. So according to H&R Block, secondary school graduates use only 34% of any learned material. Isn't that surprising? At the same time, Yale University conducted quite an extensive research, which stated that 70% of learners hate school. Another shocking fact. And then the third one comes from a report authored by the Institute for the Future, which states that 85% of the jobs that will exist in 2030 haven't been invented yet. And we are in 2022, if I'm not mistaken. There's obviously more data to be mentioned, but I think when it comes to innovation and thinking about how to innovate in education in your institutions, or maybe even just in your classroom, you need to think about three important questions. So the first one is, what are the outcomes, or what is the purpose of education? To put it in a different kind of light, what does that diploma mean? Is it just checking boxes? Is it just, doing assessments and being able to score a certain score so that you can go into university, which then again gives you a diploma for what purpose? That maybe so that it can validate your skills and someone will employ you in the future. Now, or rather, is it really to teach the right skills and prepare learners to be future ready in this exponentially changing world? Is it more about giving them the tools to have grit and resilience facing the perma crisis we're living in, or maybe even the instruments so that they can truly flourish and reach their highest potential? The second question is actually, what do we teach? What is in our curriculum? And I know that a lot of institutions cannot decide what they do. And obviously there are still single subjects that we teach. But just as Sir Ken Robinson said, it should be a bit more organic. It rarely happens that we look at things as discrete point items. Normally there is some sort of blending. So why not set it up in a more interdisciplinary manner that drives curiosity, interest, and provides personalized and meaningful curriculum, maybe even real-life experiences? And then the third one is how the instruction is set up. And that comes back to what Jeremy also mentioned, agency, and not just teacher agency, allowing our teachers to sort of organize the learning process as they want to, but also learner agency, so that there are hands-on projects, collaboration, that they can decide what they are interested in and maybe work on. Because honestly, it will rarely happen that in your work life, you're going to be confined to your office space to work alone all by yourself, figuring out a solution to a certain problem. Much rather, it's going to be happening in a group, that drives curiosity, inspiration, creativity. So these were the questions we thought really hard about setting up School of Humanity. And I would like now to kind of explain how our school works so that we can have a conversation about that I'm really looking forward to. So first and foremost, we wanted to create a school that learners love, right? And as you can see, 90% of our learners do love our programs. We wanted to nurture curiosity and this desire for lifelong learning. We wanted to create a place where the main focus is on the enthusiasm for learning, on this future readiness, and preparing our learners for this new and very, very difficult world. Now, this is why our model is fully interdisciplinary. It's also collaborative, it's completely learner-led, which means that the learners are allowed to choose the building blocks of their learning based on their interests, based on their passions and goals. And it might sound scary, but believe me, they are more than capable to actually build their learning journey. So they end up with a personalized curriculum. So this way, we managed to move away from subjects, exams, and learners. Instead of having school years, they work through 12-week learning cycles. Now, how does that work exactly? Let me show you. To start with, our curriculum is competency-based, and we've mapped out over 600, I think by now around 700 key learning outcomes, which we call the Human Development Standards. Now, these are skills, mindsets, and behaviors necessary for the 21st century. In this path, learners first choose what we call a challenge path. And this is basically driven by a local or social challenge. So topics can be, for example, health and well-being, or the future of education, designing space settlements, the future of money, and of course, there are many more. Now, here they progress by developing entrepreneurial, technological, and or creative solutions to a problem. They look at the problem at systemic level. They do root cause analysis. They narrow it down to a specific area that they can feel passionate about. And to give you an example, last summer, for example, we had a student who felt really deeply for all those Alzheimer patients who get lost and never kind of return and probably die. So she devised a working functional device to track those people who might get lost, to be able to communicate with them remotely so that they can wait calmly while they are being tracked and then taken back to a safe place. This was something relevant. It was related to the learner's own life experiences, and it was driven by her own curiosity. Isn't that beautiful? Sorry. Now, to help this process, actually, we assign assign mentors to them. And these people are real industry experts who have expertise in the field. For example, on designing space settlements, this can be an astronaut in training, which actually didn't happen, or a blockchain specialist. This is a beautiful, open-ended mentorship where learners can discuss their problems, their questions, and they can really dive deep and gain more information and insight. Also, we wanted to level a little bit the playfield. Normally, such mentors are only available for people who go into private education. So we wanted to allow our learners to be able to grow their network and, to have people in their network, that they can leverage later on as well. All right, so throughout this journey, our learners most probably will face certain challenges. They might need to learn elements of coding, for example, or carry out complex calculations to improve their financial literacy skills. Or they want to get better at, let's say, time management or project management to become able to finalize their projects. Now, in order to help with that, we have basically a learning catalog, what we call skill paths. Ultimately, this is another interdisciplinary area that focuses on a single skill or competency. So you can look at it as your traditional subject redesigned for the 21st century and totally on adrenaline. Now, while learners here work completely at their own pace, it is still not done alone, because at some point of the pathway, they will have to pair up with someone or maybe do work in their communities. Now, we really wanted to make this real life and maybe tangibly real. So what we added to our program is what we call a career path. And this means that after the learners finished solving the problem they were working on, we partner up with different organizations from the industry. And so our learners can develop further and also try all the competencies, skills, mindsets, behaviors that they have learned all through those weeks. Now, these industry partners will give them a challenge. A challenge is normally a problem they are literally facing in their companies, and they involve the learners to help with the solution. I'm very proud to say that, for example, our learners in the sustainable fashion pathway that has just graduated, they managed to come up with 3 ideas, and all of those got implemented in the company's sort of solution of the toolkit. All right, and that's not all of it. And this is obviously my favorite part, because there's an overarching kind of structure, what we call the flourishing pathway. This is at the heart of all of the learning experience. Learners have 1 session a week, and this is still an interdisciplinary experience, as we might talk about in 1 session about history, philosophy, mindfulness, spirituality, and psychology. But the modules go around what you would probably call 21st century leadership skills. So we work with self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, kind, trust, empathy. We tackle problems, for example, how to handle stress, or how to figure out our own identities, find purpose and meaning in life, and much, much, much more. So our goal was to really equip these learners so that they can become able to fully flourish and live a fulfilled life now in their schools, in the secondary school years, but also later on as they grow up as adults. Obviously, assessment cannot be done in a traditional manner either if you're doing all of this. So I'm happy to say that our assessment is also personalized, formative, and meaningful. Part of it is when they finish all of this work, they present their work at a global showcase, which actually showcases the learning journey. At the same time, they are building a portfolio, and also, as we are part of the Mastery Transcript Consortium, they get basically their skills transferred into an upgraded report card that shows the level of mastery they achieved, but a bit more holistically. It's not, a single score or letter what they get, but really a description how much they learn socially, emotionally, in their relationships, and of course, intellectually, doing all the hard work. Right, so the good news is that, for example, the Mastery Transcript Consortium is accepted in the US only by 200 universities, including Harvard and MIT, and these scores can be then translated to other more formalized standards like the AP standards in the US. Right, the whole journey obviously is also aided by what we call an advisory cycle, so that learners can get personalized help so that they can really meaningfully build those blocks of their learning. And I think this is more or less what I had time for. I'm really looking forward to your questions and feedback about the whole process, and looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kata. Fascinating. Okay, so we have heard from both our speakers, so we're going to open it up to questions now. So perhaps just to kick off, we could just think a little bit about maybe the toxins in the system as you see them, Jeremy and Kata. So Jeremy, it sounds like you'd sum up what those kind of toxins are as performativity and performance management practices. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the UK is a very unique beast. And I do think, I think within schools, the performativity is an issue. I think that the challenge is that the system itself is designed to encourage people to behave in that way. So schools, inside of the schools, there's, constant observation, monitoring, scrutiny for all the reasons I listed. But the reality is that that's often forced upon schools by organizations like Ofsted, and that because that's the way they behave with schools. And that it becomes, this rationale becomes that schools inspection or evaluation is directly linked and causal of school improvement, which I think is a really dangerous thing to believe. And unfortunately is pervasive across our system, that we truly believe that that's, those things are synonymous, and they're not.
Okay. And Kata, how would you sum up what those kind of toxins are that what you described is reacting against?
Well, you see, apart from what Jeremy mentioned, I think it's also the materials. Like, we need to acknowledge that the world is changing exponentially, especially in tech. With the pandemic, for example, there's a rise of remote workforce. We cannot ignore that there's metaverse, there's blockchain, there's a lot of digital transformation. And I feel that, whatever we teach in schools in terms of subjects, whatever is described and prescribed in the curriculum is not relevant anymore. It's not relevant in terms of the person's life. I mean, these learners obviously spend time with their computers. They have certain knowledge, they have certain expectations. They are digital natives, but not even with, the changing landscape of the workforce. I think simply we need to catch up. And this is one of the forces that holding us back.
Okay, great. Thank you. The other thing I think it would just be really helpful to deal with kind of upfront is the question of accountability, and whether your schools are a rejection of all forms of high stakes accountability. I mean, I'm guessing you'll say no, but could you just explain what accountability actually means to you in your context? So Jeremy, perhaps if you go first.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think anybody that would suggest that no form of accountability is necessary is, maybe not thought things through. Absolutely. This is public money that I'm spending, and this is, there needs to be a level of responsibility, for that. And I think that the problem is that we focus so much energy in the UK on external accountability at the expense of developing internal senses of accountability. I think that's that's a really, really big problem. And I think though that these are some of the solutions.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. And Kata, what does accountability mean in your context?
Right. For us, obviously, the most important thing to see our learners flourish, we need them to become successful no matter what the rest of the environment looks like. And obviously, probably now we are, ahead of whatever education looks like at the moment, but we still need them to be able to use all of those tools and implement it in the real world. And that means we have to be accountable so that we can evidence their learning, we can make sure that they progress, and they can, get into those places where they can bring about change, solve problems, and live a fulfilled life. For me, that would be it. So we are making sure that whatever we do, we can be actually held accountable for it so that our learners can succeed in the future.
Okay, lovely. There's a couple of comments I've seen in the chat where people are talking about students being disengaged with their school and with their learning. If people in other schools are looking to learn from you or even copy the models that you've described, how should they start? Where should they start? I mean, Kata, perhaps if you go first. Jeremy talked in his slides about the organizational principles of the school. If somebody wanted to rethink what those organizational principles are, who would they need to involve and where would they start?
I guess, start with the actual agents of the school, so the learners and the teachers both. I think it is not impossible to bring about change in the classrooms, even if you are just implementing one or two steps. It can be, for example, bringing a little bit of mindfulness in your classroom, or maybe using a solutionary methodology that Zoe Weil created, and it so beautifully helps to tie the different discrete points of the curriculum together and make it more meaningful, but also allow learners to be part of the conversation. What we do at School of Humanity is actually beautiful, because although we all have roles and certain responsibilities, everyone is involved in the process of creating such curriculum, right? So there's always feedback that is listened to. We are quite agile to react whatever the learners, whatever caregivers or parents, and also what we call facilitators and teachers or mentors have to say. I think this is where it should start, obviously within the limits of whatever is possible to that certain institution. We have it easy. We are global, so we don't have a certain mandate from a certain government, but even so, I think tiny bits of building blocks can be implemented immediately.
Yeah, you mentioned agility there, and I what struck me as you were describing your 12-week learning cycles in your program is that it's quite similar to how agile software development teams work in kind of 3-month cycles. And I was thinking, I wonder if that's a way to introduce more agility into the education system. So yeah, interesting. Jeremy, just kind of picking up on the point about people learning from you and copying your model. I mean, how long do you think it would take for another school to adopt your vision, your model, your ethos, and win the trust of teachers and learners and parents? I mean, it's kind of, how long a journey are we talking about here?
I mean, I've been here for 10 years and we're not there yet, right? So it's an ongoing journey, and I don't know if there is a place you get to. I think that, very often schools are operating the way they operate out of fear and anxiety, right? Fear because my job is not secure as a head teacher in this country. If the results go down or Ofsted result is poor, I'm going to get fired and I'm very likely going to be really difficult to reemploy. And I have a mortgage and a child and a family. And, and so fear plays a part in it, and anxiety is the other part, in the sense, or uncertainty. I mean, and uncertainty in the sense that what I'm talking about is quite unfamiliar to lots of people. It's not been a part of the system for a really long time. And a lot of the people that were a part of this way of working have since retired, or, maybe been fired, or, so it's dangerous in the UK to behave this way. So where do you start? I think first you start in here, and you have to follow that first. And if you believe that that there is a better way, and that you can grow better environments for teachers and for staff that in turn create better environments for children, then you need to find people like me or like Kata who are doing something differently, and go and ask questions. Because that's what I did. I didn't, I don't know everything, and I don't know most things. And all I did was find things that I thought sounded like they were aligned with what I believe, and said, really humbly, teach me everything, please, because what we're doing is not working.
Can you talk a little bit about any kind of backlash you've experienced, Jeremy, in doing all of this, or resistance that you've experienced, and where it's come from and how you've dealt with it?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the resistance in the beginning came from just other leaders, right? Other school leaders. That you can't lead a school that way, Jeremy. You're going to get fired. If you try and run a really happy school that takes care of people are going to get lazy, and then they're not going to do the job well, and the results are going to go down, and you're going to be fired. So, if you think you're going to do that here, it's not possible. And then it kind of shifted a little bit to like, well, it might be possible for a little while, but over time it's going to change. And then it was like, well, it might work for you in your school, but it wouldn't work here. And then it was like, well, we're just not there yet. We need to keep doing all this because we're not there. Like, it's, I've heard all the excuses in the world. But when I started at Three Bridges, it's always been a relatively nice place. People here have always been really lovely, but it was a traditional 6 lesson observations graded a year, regular book scrutinies, planning scrutinies, hemorrhaging teachers, high percentages every year. Like, that's what it was. And I think what we did was we started small with quick wins. So in 2013, 2014, that's when this school got rid of marking as a major emphasizer on workload. We got rid of the things that were really, really high time, really low impact, and really low passion. And that came from doing what Kata said. We're like speaking to children, speaking to staff, and saying, what's the stuff that is disengaging you, or what's the stuff that's driving you out the door? And then being open and honest with ourselves and saying, well, I guess we need to change some of that. Because it's hard as a leader, right? Especially if you've been in school for a while, for someone to come in and sit down and tell you, these things, they're not working, or I don't like them, or, they don't align with me. I think it's hard sometimes for people to hear that. But you have to let go of some of these ideas we've held on to, which is hard, and in England, dangerous.
Yeah. And you had some numbers, Jeremy, in your slides about the number of teachers leaving the profession. Can you say a little bit about those numbers in your school? What does the teacher retention rate or burnout rate look like?
0, right? We don't have any.
Okay.
We've staff have been here for a really long time. Listen, London's I'm on a very comfortable inner London head teacher salary, and I can't afford to live in London. So those are factors. People sometimes move out of the city and start a family, and I don't know, other areas that are not commutable to here. We have maternity leaves. We have people that take promotion and go, and do other things. But in terms of how many people in the last, 5, 6, 7 years have left the school because they're burnt out or miserable or hate their job, 0, none, not one. It just is not. It's not even in the people here. If I said that someone was leaving for that, they'd think I was joking. They'd be like, "Where's the camera? Are you trying to catch me in something here?" Never. It's just not the kind of environment we try to create.
Okay, fascinating. Okay, Kata, can we just move on a little bit to think about? So we've talked, about kind of agency and teacher development, but the school as a whole. So what I'm interested in when you see something interesting in other schools, how you figure out whether it will work in your school, how you go about adopting those new innovations into the school, and what role do the learners and the teachers play in that?
Oh, beautiful. I love this question. We do make sure that we build partnerships, and we make sure that we kind of partner up with other institutions so that we can meaningfully collaborate and trial some things. As I said, we move really fast. So that means that whenever there's a new good idea or something flopped and didn't work, that we're going to just reshape it and redo it. So for example, we are constantly redesigning how our four-year high school is going to look like, because obviously we go through the learning cycles, but there needs to be kind of other elements added. So we are listening to all those suggestions, information, implementing it, testing it, and then getting feedback from, again, caregivers, learners, and also facilitators, so that we can then shape it to whatever we want it to look like.
Okay, great. There's a question in the chat I can see from Rajashri Anand. Who should then be accountable for teacher well-being and performance? During the pandemic, the possibility of being observed through unclear standards in a new online setup weighed on teachers. Would either of you like to respond to that?
I'm happy to comment on. First of all, observing teachers online during the pandemic, I think, is an outrageous decision to make. I'm so sorry that that's happened. But yeah, who should be accountable for teachers' well-being? I think it's a joint venture. I think that as grown people, we are responsible for our health, well-being, happiness, our own decisions, our conditions in which we're in. I think there absolutely has to be a part of that is handed to the person themselves. But the other side of that, in an institution like this, I'm responsible. I'm responsible too. My job is to create the kind of conditions under which everybody can flourish, where people can be their very, very best. And that means being flexible, that means being adaptable, means being approachable, means being kind, like just being a nice person, and realizing that everybody who's working here, yes, has a job to do, and yes, are employed. We're not volunteering, it's not a social club, but that we're all human beings, and that we go through ages and stages, and that my job as a head teacher is really to help buffer the staff here from any distraction from their work, their well-being that is going to impact upon what they do here. So I think it's a joint venture. I think people need to be responsible for themselves, but I think the leaders of organizations absolutely have a responsibility for the kind of conditions and climate that they create for the people that work with them.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. Kata, anything you'd like to add to that?
I agree 100%. And the way it's done, obviously, if you want to have results, first you have to prepare your teachers, facilitators, name it, so that they are ready, for example, to get an observation online and know what to do and how it works. But most importantly, I think, as Jeremy mentioned, the climate. So what are the values that you represent? For example, our core team, as we call it, we kind of pledge that we would deliver, we do as we promise, that we're going to do everything from a place of love, which is the most important thing, that we would be open to learning and new ways of thinking. And that means integrating all the people who we are working with, equally staff and learners, to be humble, to overcome our egos in a conversation, and just try to be truthful and well-reasoned even when it's difficult. Now, if you work along these lines, I think you can create a different environment where your teachers can really truly flourish.
Okay, awesome. We seem to only have a couple of minutes left, but so it'd be great to just finish with thinking a little bit about the future and your visions for the future. Kind of what's next in your schools in the next 5 to 10 years? What have you got planned? Kata, maybe if you start.
Right. Well, we've got a lot of plans, obviously. We've been working on kind of fine-tuning our four-year model. We are going through accreditation as well at the moment, and setting up partnerships. We already have partnerships with, for example, the Abu Dhabi Ministry of Education, or the new city that they created in Neom, also in Dubai. We are reaching out to other universities as well. We have some partnerships with, for example, the London Interdisciplinary School or the Worcester Polytechnic, the University of Rhode Island, so that we can collaborate with them. Essentially, what we want to is grow in the sense of creating this global community, setting up, a global setting for our learners where you don't really have to teach diversity anymore, because it is a diverse setting where learners work and collaborate together. And really just truly add certain elements and programs to it. At the moment, we have our summer school, our after school program, and obviously the 4-year high school that we are starting this September, and just see how that flourishes. And I won't say that obviously this is the only sort of alternative pedagogical or educational model that needs to be followed. There are several similar alternative schools that are trying out new things. And I just want to see this initiative grow. And I want to see it sort of, really becoming able to disrupt the system and validate that what we are doing is actually meaningful, it's worthwhile, and it brings results.
Okay, thank you very much. Jeremy?
I mean, I think there's lots to do. And I mean, it would be really easy, actually. Sometimes I'm sitting in my office wondering why I don't just move myself back to Ontario, be the principal of one school, and not worry about Ofsted and high stakes testing and all this sort of nonsense. Because it would be quite easy to do that. The reason that I've stayed in this country is because I believe that there is another way. And the future for us, I think, is about working closely with other schools that are interested to help not carbon copy or photocopy or absolutely replicate what we do here, but using their own ethos, their own approaches, their own values, help create the kind of climates and conditions in their schools that keep teachers and staff being their very best, and then providing that very, very best of themselves to the young people that they serve. So I'm very interested in working with other schools to help create that kind of environment, so that one day we're not going to be reading out a statistic of 40% of teachers saying that they're leaving in the first 5 years, that in the group of schools that we're working with, that number will be 0, that everybody will love what they do, and then translate that into what they do with the young people.
Okay, brilliant. That's a great note to end on. That's all we have time for today. A huge thanks to Jeremy and Kata for their ideas and for the discussion. Thanks also to the team behind the scenes that keep these events running. And thanks to everyone for joining. We'll continue these discussions at future live streams and at our upcoming bigger SHAPE events. And if you're interested in being involved, please register your interest at shapeeducation.org. Have a lovely rest of the day and hope to see you at another event soon.